Hello, all, and welcome to today's presentation, Automating Sensitive Data Collection and Architecting Trustworthy Processes that Scale. My name is Josh Straley. If you have been attending the webinars in this series, I should be a familiar face. Just a quick housekeeping and agenda coverage before we get started today. You should see a Q&A module on your screen. That is the best way to get in contact with me during today's presentation. If you have any questions, if you can't hear me, please submit your Q&A questions there. We'll also be doing a live Q&A after the demo today. So if you have any questions, you'd like to see more, let us know. I have some resources for you. If you did miss the last webinar in this series, which was about authenticating Salesforce forms, you can watch that on demand today. And if you're a Salesforce admin, Salesforce architect, and you're interested in bringing what we call a magic button into your Salesforce instance, which actually looks like being able to launch pre-filled forms from Salesforce records, I have a great webinar next week for you to attend. It's on Thursday. If you want to register for that live session, you can see that as well. But then I also have that on-demand session for you too. Last but not least, and I should always cover this as part of housekeeping, today's session is recorded. So if you do need to drop for any reason or you want to share it with a colleague after today's session, look for an email in your inbox about 24 hours after today's session. That's when we normally get them over to you. We do and have been in this series been doing these webinars very quickly. So we're going to go pretty fast. Make sure you get your questions in fast because I know some people have exited webinars and then been like, oh, I meant to ask something. So please ask those questions as we go through our session today. I'm joined by my good friend, Tom Gooding, Solutions Engineer for today's demo. I'll be bringing Tom on stage in just a moment to do the demo. But for those of you in the audience, I have a quick question to start off today's presentation. You came to a sensitive data collection webinar. I'm interested in what kind of sensitive data you or your organization is concerned about collecting. I've got a couple of the main components, the ones that we see here all the time at FormAssembly: personal health information, if you are a part of a healthcare institution. If you are in a higher ed institution, you might be collecting several types of information. Of course, your school might be offering health programs to students. You might be asking for, home life things or personal identifiable information as part of a grant process, scholarship process, etc. You might be from a FinServ, financial services institution, collecting financial data. And you might be a government entity or a public sector organization. You might be collecting government data, or you might be collecting other. Interested in hearing what you're collecting? Let us know. We'll go ahead and take that into account with our presentation. Actually, let's go ahead and take a look. We've only gotten a couple votes, but I'll go ahead and close this out. All right, so PII is the main component. That's great. We're going to take a look in today's demo at some health information, but health information is a part of that PII landscape. The tactics that you'll see in today's demo are perfectly applicable, especially if you're worried about storing PII in Salesforce. So you came to the right place. I hope the demo is of interest to you. Before I hand things over to Tom, I do want to talk with this group about why sensitive data is so important in 2026 and how the definition has been expanding. Lately, I think just in the last election cycle, not these most recent primaries, but like November 2025, a lot of states have passed legislation expanding what they consider to be PII in their states. That is starting to include things like geolocation data, which is often collected as metadata during the data collection process. Some other things that weren't commonly understood to be a part of sensitive data, government issue ID numbers. Yes, we've always thought of Social Security as a sensitive number, but even driver's license numbers are now starting to become defined as PII and starting to become, regulated as a part of some of these data sensitivity data processing laws. Financial data continues to expand what people consider financial data, very similar to PHI, where PHI, initially was actual diagnoses, medications, et cetera. Now, if your address is associated with a doctor's bill, well, that all becomes PHI. And there have been recent additions to what is considered PHI, including mental health designations, gender identity, and sexual orientation, which I see is misspelled on my slide. I hope you're forgiven for that. We want to talk about the stakes today. These numbers always look scary. I always take, the numbers with a grain of salt. And I've always also wondered, when you see the cost of a data breach reported in, a news article reported in, like the Wall Street Journal, reported online broadly, I've always wondered, hey, where does the cost actually come from? Digging a little bit deeper into those huge numbers, a lot of that is associated with the time it takes and the third parties that are necessary to come in and identify, confirm a breach and confirm its impact. You're talking about hiring third-party forensic investigation teams, assessment teams, crisis management teams, as well as the work that your organization puts in to reach out and contact, those that are impacted by a breach. And hopefully your organization is never impacted by a breach, but this is where those costs come in. There's also substantial costs when it comes to paying for credit monitoring services, which is often a common way to assuage those impacted by this. Just digging into that number, I always want to call out where those costs come from. Why it's higher stakes in 2026 than 2025, though, is something that we've been really looking at. We've looked at how manual data processes compound over time with the introduction of AI and really slow down companies. But when it involves sensitive data, the ability to use that data in AI processes means that your risk surface, where that sensitive data might be exposed or misused, becomes exponential, especially as you start to use agentic AI across your CRM or across these other data repositories and systems of record where you attach an AI agent to. We know that teams are already digging into their data to prepare it for AI. They're spending 43% of their time preparing it. When you introduce sensitive data to that, and that starts to come in with, role-based restrictions where not every person on your team can even access to, use and audit and change sensitive information, that means you're slowing down. So sensitive data, brings an extra level of complexity to every data collection and data processing process. And the average number of organizations, the average number of compliance frameworks that we're starting to see across organizations is starting to creep up as well. There's state-based compliance frameworks. There's obviously these broad ones like SOC 2. If you're collecting health information, you've got HIPAA. If you're abroad, you have GDPR. Then, of course, in the United States, on the state side, we are introducing more regulations as well. And as we mentioned earlier, that expansion of the GLBA on financial services. So, sensitive data as a whole is becoming harder to manage. There are expanding definitions of sensitive data, and the manual processes involved in sensitive data is really starting to slow down organizations. So that's why we wanted to host this webinar today. That's why we're bringing you this information. Here at FormAssembly, we bring some very specific tools to bear on sensitive data collection. Obviously, we are involved in data collection processes. Most of our customers use us for automating data collection as it goes into Salesforce. And here are the tools that we bring to help organizations, meet their compliance standards and handle sensitive data correctly, because data stewardship is still our mission. So we allow you to mask data at the point of entry. We allow you to encrypt that data so it's sent, both stored and sent safely, both in transit and at rest. And we give you this conditional logic layer above your CRM or your system of record where you, the admin, architect, FormAssembly user, can choose what information that you're sending over to your CRM. If you're not ready to store PII in Salesforce because you're worried about user-based record permissions, we can help you out. If you are using Salesforce in conjunction with an EHR, electronic health record system, we can help you send the sensitive health information to the EHR while sending your customer information to CRM and allowing you to handle both of those compliantly in those systems where they're supposed to be. So we give you this kind of sanitization is the term I'm using here, but we give you this control over where your data, not only how it's collected, safely masked, encrypted, but also where it goes. So that's very important. So that's what we're going to show in today's demo. I'm going to hand things over to my friend Tom from our solutions engineers team, and he's going to show you how to architect a sensitive data collection process, specifically sending those records to Salesforce. If you have any questions during the demo, please get those submitted to the Q&A, and Tom will handle those, and I'll be here as well. But let me kick things over to Tom. Tom, hello.
Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and jump straight into the demonstration where we can take a look at some of the features that FormAssembly has to offer to ensure sensitive data is handled correctly and securely. It's a given that obviously all data submitted via a FormAssembly form is encrypted at transit and in rest, but there are additional features within the platform where we can go ahead and sort of label that this is sensitive information, and it brings a couple of additional benefits to doing so. So the use case we're going to go through today is a patient intake form. As you can imagine, there's going to be some sensitive information on that form. Not all of it is sensitive, but some of it is. And we're going to classify it as sensitive information. And this will give us some additional benefits when it comes to viewing the response or when it comes to audits, etc., that you know exactly what fields are collecting that sensitive information. So we're going to open up the form that's at the beginning of this workflow. And we'll see here, it's a very simple form. We've got a few fields on there for first name, last name, email address, etc. And you'll see a couple of these fields have labels on. And this is for the fields that are sensitive information. So in order to add the sensitive information label to a field, you'd select it and go to its options. And you'll see here we have a sensitive data section. Now from the drop-down, you'd select what type of sensitive information it is. So if it's a credit card number, etc. And in this case, for social security number, I'm categorizing it as personally identifiable information, as that makes sense. And I'm putting it as first party, as it would be the patient filling it in. It's their information. And this just helps so that when you're looking at your forms, you know what forms are collecting what type of sensitive information. So when it comes to auditing and things like that, you'll have a bit more control. I've got another field here for the insurance member ID. Again, I've labeled this as PII, first party. And then the last three fields are actually health related. So I've actually labeled them as protected health information, again, first party, and that's just because that's what the data points are related to. So it's as simple as that to add the sensitive data tag to the field. So now if we go back to the workflow, so now you've seen how the form looks, and I'll actually have that within my workflow. We've then got our page redirect and our Salesforce connector. The advantage of labeling those fields as sensitive is other users within FormAssembly, depending on their permission sets that they've been given, may or may not be able to see that sensitive data. Now, by default, the data is redacted if it is marked as sensitive. So if I was to come to responses here, you'll see I've got a couple from testing. If I open this, you'll see here that the response is locked due to that sensitive field. If I click view response, you'll see here that we've got redacted data. So by default, as these are sensitive fields, any user that comes and looks at his response will not be able to see that information. They need to unlock that. So to see the information, you can simply click unlock. You then enter the password for the account, and we're able to see the information. So if I open that, you'll now see that we have the information in the response that is now visible. We go back to the workflow, and we'll move on to the Salesforce connector. You'll notice here that I'm actually doing two actions. So once this form is submitted, I'm actually going to send the information to Salesforce, as that's the CRM that I'm using. And I've got two actions. I'm going to create a patient record, but I'm also going to create a sensitive information record. So I've got two different objects there. So we've got create patient, and I'm sending over the patient information. And then the next step, I've actually got the create sensitive info object type, which is a custom object I've made within my Salesforce, which I'll show you in a moment. And here you can see this is where we're sending that sensitive information. So again, we're able to send information where it needs to go. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. We can send specific fields to specific places, or we don't send anything at all. It's up to you and how you want to configure it. So here I'm sending all the sensitive information to that record. And then lastly, as I mentioned, we've got a webhook connector here where I'm sending over some of that sensitive information as well, just to show that we can send certain data points. It doesn't have to be all of them. It can be whichever ones you want. So if we come over to our Salesforce, you'll see here patient records. I currently have none in there. And if I were to open my web page where the form is going to be embedded on, the workflow is embedded on this page. If we scroll down, we can see here, there's my form, and we're going to fill this out. Okay, some of the information is already there as default values. Just to speed this up, you can see we've got field masking on as well to ensure we're getting the right syntax. I'll add something in there. I'll leave the rest as it is. So I'll go ahead and submit my form. And now, as the workflow says, we've got our thank you page. And in the background, it's going to run that Salesforce connector. If we come back over here and we open the record, you'll see I've got my new patient record here with the information. And then if I go to its related sensitive information record, we can see here all the sensitive information, those fields that I've mentioned. I've decided to send it over to this because that's where my organization wants sensitive information placed, rather than on just the patient records that maybe some users have access to, but they shouldn't see the rest here. So that's how you can separate the sensitive information from the information that can be visible. If we go over to the webhook that I was sending to, you see here that the information was also successfully sent over via the webhook connector. And coming back to the workflow, if we were to go to our responses page, we'll see here that the newest response, again, it shows us locked and redacted for the information that was actually marked as sensitive. So keeping the data protected from those eyes that should not be seeing that information within the platform itself, but the values can actually be sent to the endpoints that you need it to. And one more thing I wanted to cover is we also have within the platform purge options. So you can come to your dashboard, you have data retention, you've got purge settings. There's various settings in there that can delete the information upon successful submission of a form, or on a time frame, maybe a day after the workflow has been submitted, it can clear that out as well to ensure that your information is being handled correctly. So a nice quick demonstration showing you how sensitive data can be used within FormAssembly, and I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. I was saying about the stakes earlier, and I'm glad you showed specifically like audit capabilities and purge capabilities, because a lot of the time you approach sensitive data collection as this risk. It's risk mitigation. It's making sure that your company is not subject to a data breach, or you don't have employees out of compliance touching sensitive data. It's all about keeping your company safe. But there are some advantages that you also find when you start handling data correctly inside of every system. That's why it's important for us at FormAssembly that we provide these tools for you, because we see it as a competitive advantage. If you have a security team and you've talked to them during audit season, they can be hard to get a hold of because they are busy ripping through logs, providing tons of documentation, answering questions from third-party auditors. FormAssembly giving you, logging capabilities makes their job easier, makes your team move faster, means that they're not inside of FormAssembly, struggling to find the information you need. The same way that automated purge allows you and your organization to set the rules that work for the type of data and the type of processes that you're running, and get rid of it from FormAssembly, so that you don't have this like another risk surface, as I said earlier. If you are collecting sensitive information and you're sending it to places where you should store it, delete it out of your data collection system. That's what automated purge allows you to do. And again, we talked about AI a little bit. When you handle data correctly, compliantly, and you send it to the right places at the beginning, it makes your AI implementations in your agentic projects a lot easier. That's where a lot of organizations are getting hung up. We did a webinar 2 months ago where we talked about some survey data from some AI-focused organizations, and really the time savings that they want to see with AI is being blocked because of all the manual work they have to do to prepare the data. So, FormAssembly allows you to set these rules, to automate these processes, and make sure that the data you're collecting is, again, clean, complete, ready for AI, and in the case of today's demonstration, compliantly collected as well. I would like, if you have any questions, we've got a couple questions in the Q&A. Audience, if you have any more, I'm going to start tossing some questions Tom's way. Get any questions you have into the chat, if you, pardon me, not chat, but the Q&A module. But first, I do have a question for you. We're doing quick demos as a part of this webinar series. I know we didn't show off everything that we can do, and we might not have covered your use case. Would you like to schedule a personalized demo with FormAssembly where you can see these tools in action and kind of, hash them out with a FormAssembly expert? We would love to schedule that for you. I'll give you 20 seconds. I don't want to rush you. Go ahead and click your response here, and I will get a demo scheduled for you if you would like one. While we have this up, let me go ahead and tackle a question. We are in healthcare and also process payments. No, fair. We're dealing with both HIPAA and PCI DSS. Yes. How do you architect a single form that satisfies both? An interesting question. Something that we definitely handle, and we do this not just for healthcare, but for a lot of organizations. Tom, maybe I'll have you describe this. Maybe it's more of a workflow than a form, but I know you can do both. How would someone handle, sensitive data collection and maybe a fee processing kind of situation?
Yeah, so by default, the platform, depending on the plan you're on, if you're on the certain plan that covers the HIPAA compliance, then that data will be stored within FormAssembly, meeting those compliance rules, along with PCI DSS as well. When you add a field on the form that's going to be capturing the credit card number, for example, that will be marked that way. And so you're going to meet that compliance. We don't store the data of credit card information on the back end, so we can meet those regulations. And likewise, the HIPAA data is encrypted the right way, so then that is also there. So really, it's nothing special you need to do on it. Just make sure you're on the right plan, and obviously that you're using the right options for credit card fields and things like that on the form or within the workflow.
Yeah, this next question kind of in the same boat. How do you decide which fields actually need encryption versus just field level security? Is there a framework for that triage? It sounds like maybe we're asking maybe about masking. Just to be very clear, FormAssembly has encryption on form level fields in transit and at rest. So there is just, blanket encryption, kind of as Tom alluded to there. But maybe you're asking about marking sensitive fields. Tom, do you have a framework for deciding when to mark fields as sensitive as you showed?
Yeah, that one's a bit difficult to answer because it's a bit of an open-end question. It all comes down to what your organization is doing and the information you're capturing and what guidelines or regulations that you need to follow. So we wouldn't be able to give you a blanket answer of you need to be doing this or what framework we would use. Depending again on your organization and what information you're collecting, just whatever regulations are in place, you'd make sure that those fields on your form have been set to be sensitive information and so on and so on. So there's not really a straightforward answer on that, but it should be pretty easy to set up.
Right. Yes. And as you showed, we make it super simple to do that at the field level. And then again, that filters through into the response records as well. This next question I'll take, because I kind of set us up for it. With the new state privacy laws expanding what counts as sensitive, how do we know if our current forms are now out of compliance, even if they were fine 2 years ago? That's a fantastic question. And I'll be honest, like at this time, you're going to need to review them based on your organization, your state, your location's data laws. If you are using FormAssembly today, and you have experience with Faye, our AI agent on the platform, Faye can help you, monitor your form while you're building it and say, hey, does this meet best practices? Does this, from the looks of it, meet compliance standards? Again, obviously, Faye's not a lawyer; it's an AI agent, so you always need to double check this with your organization's standards and your compliance teams. We hope to be able to offer kind of a review process. Best practice now, I would say, is labeling your forms in the FormAssembly backend where you are collecting certain types of data, maybe tagging that, mentioning it in the description to make that audit a bit easier for your organization. You can, go through and kind of like search your response records for certain field types, that sort of thing. But this is really, when laws change, this should trigger some work from your team to go through and, make changes. Luckily, FormAssembly makes it incredibly easy to change forms, to change fields, to, as you saw, mark them as sensitive. So when you need to respond to change, we make it super simple. Right now, though, that is going to require a manual review. Let's see. I have a question. Oh, this is interesting. We mentioned social security numbers. How does FormAssembly handle masking for fields that need to be partially visible, like showing only the last 4 digits of a social security number after submission? Tom, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, so by default, when you do mark a field as sensitive, as you saw in the demo, it will actually redact the whole thing. It doesn't do partial redaction. However, for cards, I do believe that by default, as we don't store that information, it will show just the last 4 numbers by default. And for social security number, well, then you would need to build that logic into your form. So you could use things like maybe capturing the social security number, mark that as sensitive, and then have a calculate field that is doing just the last 4 digits of that one. And that one will be visible just the last 4 digits because you didn't mark it as sensitive on the back end. So then that way you've got both, the best of both worlds there. Depends on your use case.
Nice, yes. And I do love that. It gives you a little more agility while still remaining compliant. Let's see. This is a great question. How do automated purge settings work in practice? Does it delete from Salesforce 2 or just from FormAssembly? I can handle this one. And Tom, if you have anything to add, I'd be happy for you to toss in here. It does. We do not go in and delete records from your Salesforce instance. So these kind of controls are, again, to make sure that FormAssembly remains a clean and compliant pass-through for your data. We're basically a data intake layer. We do, of course, as you saw, have submission records. You do want to get those out of your data collection platform. Of course, we offer HIPAA compliant plans with BAA, so you can collect data safely on our platform, but really in best practice, you need to minimize where that information is stored. So that's what that purge setting is there for, making sure that this passed through the FormAssembly layer, clean, compliant, not a part of that risk that your compliance team needs to worry about. But very clearly, I want to state, we do not go in and clean up your Salesforce records. That is, again, on your Salesforce team. We're not going to touch that data. And that's where we give you the conditional logic, as Tom showed, that, hey, you don't have to necessarily store PII or PHI in Salesforce if that is not your data strategy. You could send that to another system that is meant for sensitive information. You could send it to something, again, like an EHR. Epic comes to mind. And that way, Salesforce remains this customer data, source of truth. And then you have your medical records elsewhere. So, the purge settings, again, really just help you keep FormAssembly clean as that data collection layer and store that information elsewhere. I've got a couple more questions. We've been keeping these to half an hour, so I do want to make sure that we get out on time today. I think I can squeeze in 2 more. What's the right approach for KYC, know your customer flows, where you need to collect a document image like a driver's license? How do you handle that before it hits Salesforce? Interesting. Let me just, I can answer this as well. We do allow for document uploads inside of FormAssembly. We really didn't tackle that today, but if you needed to upload a PNG or another type of file and associate that with a Salesforce record, that's something that our customers use FormAssembly for all the time. We also make it, if I haven't talked about data routing enough today, we make it super simple to take that image and store it in a file storage medium like Box, Dropbox, SharePoint, Google Drive, if you'd prefer not to have that on the Salesforce record. I know we've done some webinars on this, but you can also have that file label in your storage service. Also maybe match a Salesforce record. You could pass like an ID number back so you can know which Salesforce record that file's associated with, even when it's not stored in Salesforce. Some really interesting opportunities there. But yes, if you need to collect a document image, we have file upload fields for you that you would be able to use. And this last one, I might need some help with. We'll see. Where do you recommend starting when auditing an existing Salesforce org for sensitive data exposure, forms, fields, or integrations? Very interesting. Not a Salesforce expert. Tom, have you seen any best practices on this end?
Again, that one's a little bit of an open-ended question when it comes to how you should approach. Haven't really got anything from my side of things. Again, I'm not a Salesforce administrator, so it's probably best to go towards that team and see, and just, again, look up the local regulations compared to the data you're collecting and just start from there to see if there's something really obvious, but nothing in particular from my side.
Yes, again, we make it very easy to collect the information and send it to your systems of record. Once it gets into Salesforce, yeah, that's up to your data strategy. I would take that conversation to your Salesforce admin or your compliance team as well. All right. Well, that's all of the questions we have today. Tom, I want to thank you for hanging around, both for the demo and for answering the questions. Much appreciated. And audience, I want to thank you for your questions. Just a reminder, if you are looking for a platform to help you collect sensitive data better, easier, especially if you're working inside of Salesforce, FormAssembly is that platform. We give you a consolidated place for all of your data collection processes. We make it super simple to automate those processes and handle data compliantly, putting you in control. I would encourage you, if you liked what you saw today, to check out some of our other resources. I've got some help documentation in the Resource Center. You can click through and read up on how sensitive data collection works at FormAssembly. You can, of course, still schedule a personalized demo with our team. And then I have 2 more webinars that we would love to see you at next week, and an on-demand resource as well. So make sure to check out the Resource Center today before you leave. Audience, thank you so much for joining us. I will see you on our next one. And again, look for the recording of today's session in about 24 hours. Then it will show up in your email inbox. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. We'll see you at the next one.